Chaos at Nairobi's Jomo Kenyatta Airport. A strike caused delays throughout the region. Authorities called in riot police to disperse the protesters. Workers say they're unhappy about a planned merger between the airport authority and the national airline.
Hundreds of passengers stuck at Kenya's main international airport. A strike prompted by a labour dispute over contracts and job security disrupted flights in Nairobi. 25 airlines operate out of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, including Turkish Airlines, Emirates and South African Airways. Picketing staff at odds with Kenya Airways protested outside the airport before being dispersed by riot police. Kenya's Transport Minister James Macharia criticised the planned strike, which had earlier been ordered to be suspended by a court injunction.
That is called malice, it is called sabotage, it is called economic sabotage. It is something which cannot be tolerated. It is criminal activity. And that's why you found the security agencies are here. They managed to chase away everybody who was bringing trouble.
In a tweet, Kenya Airways earlier advised some customers not to come to the airport. It's since issued a revised travel schedule, although some flights have been combined and others cancelled.
North Korea is restoring part of a rocket test site just a week after failed denuclearization talks with President Donald Trump. Satellite images show restoration of the site started several weeks ago. It was dismantled when Kim Jong-un met Trump last year, but talks broke down last week at the summit in Hanoi over differences on how far North Korea was willing to limit its nuclear program and the degree of U.S. willingness to ease sanctions. A U.S. National Security Advisor has since warned that new sanctions could be introduced if Pyongyang does not scrap its nuclear weapons program. Well, Algeria is on fire as tens of thousands take to the streets. Protesters say that President Abdelaziz Bouteflika has overstayed his welcome after 20 years at the helm. Disbelief that Bouteflika is running for a fifth term in office has quickly turned to anger and rolling protests. The 82-year-old president suffered a stroke 6 years ago, which left him barely able to walk or talk. He was last out in public in 2014, and Algerians are refusing to be ruled by a leader who's never seen. Now, many now worry that if President Bouteflika's successor is not found, it'll lead to political instability should the 82-year-old die in office. Joining me in the studio tonight is Ibrahim Dean from the Afro-Middle East Center. Good to have you with us, Ibrahim Dean. Could this be their first Arab Spring?
I'm very hesitant to use the word in the terms Arab Spring. It somehow sometimes denotes, no prior causation, and we stop looking at the causal factors. The fact that Bouteflika, hasn't been seen for the past 2-3 years, that, this is his fifth term in charge, that oil prices are lower now than they were 2-3 years ago. So, when we use the word Arab Spring, I think those parts get forgotten. But I do think that, the protest at the moment is at a critical mess, tens of thousands of people. Bouteflika has had to at least concede a bit. But I do think that, if he doesn't concede enough, these protests look like they will continue. There is possibility.
If he's never seen, who's pulling the strings here? Who's propping him up?
Yeah, Algeria generally is ruled by what most people term la pouvoir, which is a cabal of business people, the military and the intelligence services. And Bouteflika is mainly the figurehead of this movement. And so, yes, calls are for Bouteflika, not to survive or not to, run for a fifth term. But, many are looking and calling for, a radical overhaul of, the governance structures. Because, of which Bouteflika is the head.
Okay. Now, he was born in Morocco way back in 1937, before World War II. Let's take a look at President Bouteflika's rise to power. He joined the Army of National Liberation at the age of 19 in 1956, appointed Minister of Sport and Tourism at 25, President of the UN General Assembly in 1974. He was elected president in 1999. He suffered a stroke in 2013. President Bouteflika is contesting a fifth term in office. It's not only that, is it, Ibrahim, that they're contesting? I mean, there are no jobs, the economy's in the doldrums. You wonder what sort of ripple effect this is going to have on not only the country, but the neighbours. Everybody's petrified with this kind of demonstration, considering most of them are dictators.
Yes, I mean, Algeria is at least in terms of what people talk about stability. It's has been one of the most stable countries for the past 20 years. Now we see these protests because, I mean, as you said, it's lack of jobs, lack of employment opportunities. Many of the population are under 30. They have forgotten the whole, what they call the black decade of the 1990s. But, we have protests currently occurring in Sudan. We have, an instability in South Sudan. We have instability around Libya, Algeria's border in Libya. Tunisia is still navigating its transition, 8 years after its dictator was overthrown. So, the regional ructions of instability in Algeria could be, very big. I mean, currently it doesn't seem so. It doesn't seem as if the military is using any force. Yes, there have been attempts at containing the protests, and so, it is it's contained within Algeria. But, if things take a
how
move.
worried should we be? I mean, when you saw, and referring back to the Arab Spring, because it was something that offered so much hope, sort of Algeria escaped that. But, the lasting impact of that is that it firmly entrenched dictatorship, didn't it?
Yes, yeah. Many of these countries further securitized.
Immovable now.
Yes, yeah. I mean, Saudi Arabia, Sisi in Egypt, the UAE monarchy, Morocco, all of them have been entrenched because of the Arab Spring, or at least, how they perceive the Arab Spring. I think, though, within Algeria is a bit different. Wasn't the monarchy, wasn't the republic as entrenched in the region as other countries. Algeria sees itself more pivoting towards Africa. I think Algeria had these oil resources that allowed it to basically wait out or, pacify the protests in 2011. I think, what's different now within Algeria is the protests are relatively peaceful. Not much military containment. There's tear gas, there's silencing of dissent on radio and media, but the protests have occurred. What may change is if the military decides to use more violence or adopt contain protests in a more violent manner. That may lead to...
their bloody past will prevent them from doing that. Ibrahim Deen, thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Sport with Kate is next, and then are race quotas killing our sports teams, or is it insane that we still don't have anywhere close to representative transformation? Solidarity's Deputy CEO, Werner Hermann, and the editor of Race to Transformation, Ashwin Desai, join me next.